What's the worst mistake you've made at work? Was showing a customer how to run his round baler, farm equipment, and ended up having the 1,000-pound round bale roll downhill, through a fence, and into a manned swimming pool. Back in the mid-2000s I was working at a small financial firm. One day, I accidentally clicked the sort by column in an Excel spreadsheet with every client's. We probably had 500 clients' accounts, address and information. Well, unbeknownst to young little me, I was 18. Far younger than any other person in the office. That shuffled every single address, so none matched up with the clients' names. That weekend several pieces of mail were sent to each address, and come Monday, well, crap. None of the mail was sent to the right address. Clients were P. Co-workers were P. Management was P. Overall, the mistake cost about $15,000. No one ever found out it was me, as I was young and not high up in the company and nearly every single person had looked over that spreadsheet at one point in time. Yet, I felt awful about it. No, I never said anything. They spent weeks trying to figure out what had happened, and honestly I didn't realize my mistake until after the whole mess transpired. You didn't frick up. A sysadmin fricked up by allowing a business critical spreadsheet to be writable by you. First time using the phones at work, I accidentally hung up on a girl who wanted to compliment how well the customer service was when she shopped there. I felt horrible. I'll show you some customer service. Click. I worked for a catering company when I was 16. While working a pretty fancy wedding, I was tasked with pouring champagne at the bride and groom's table. I had never even opened a champagne bottle, so I obviously hadn't poured any either. I managed to spill champagne all over the bride, immediately after blasting her in the face with the cork. You just won the thread. Not as much monetary damage as other stories, but oh man, you fricked that one up. I work in oil field, and during my first week with my current company, I've been here 6 years, I was trying to take apart a piece of expensive oil well technology in something called a breakout machine, which allows you to apply and release torque on rotary connections in huge amounts, like 50-60, 000 featuring LBS. Anyhow, this piece of equipment, a pressure mill, had come back from a well site and I attempted to take it apart in this machine. Having just been trained, and having no one around that day, and me being rah-rah to try and impress with my initiative, I cranked up the torque on the breakout machine and kept turning a connection on the equipment that wasn't meant to be turned. When it was clear this thing wasn't coming apart, I walked around to the other side of the machine and looked at the piece. It had completely blown out and distended, with mashed steel splayed out all over the place. I couldn't see this from my vantage point when operating the machine. I walked to the general manager's office, not even my foreman was there that day, explained it, and we went and looked at the damage. He sighed, lit up a cigarette and said, "Well, that's worth about $15,000, shrugged and walked out. The next day, my foreman was back to work and said, "Hey, when I was new I did the same thing. Only the equipment was in prototype phase and worth $40,000. Then there was the other time me and another shop hand, allegedly, assembled some equipment incorrectly and it fell apart down an oil well our company was servicing. It ended up costing close to $750,000 in remediation and rig costs. But that was never proven. Ahem. TLDR. Destroyed equipment. $15,000. Failed to put equipment together correctly. $750,000. I was doing some vacuum leak testing in a $40,000 acrylic vacuum chamber that was filled with water dyed with methylene blue. We were using a 45-pound weight to hold the samples down. The weight slipped off the sample and crashed into the bottom of the tank, cracking the bottom plate of the tank and spewing all of its 30 gallons of blue water all over the freshly painted white floor in the lab. In my defense, my boss instructed me to use the weight even though I told him it wouldn't work. He was understanding. Told me to spread the water all over the floor to dye the whole thing, and slap some silicone cork onto the crack. I did both and continued to test once the cork had dried. Believe it or not, the cork held. I convinced him to let me buy a clamp to hold the samples down for the rest of the testing. Haha. TLDR. Dropped a weight, cracking the bottom of a $40,000 vacuum chamber. And look at the bright side. Now you have a lovely blue floor. Mentioned to the pilot that his red light on the wing was out. Grounded the plane on Thanksgiving night for 12 plus hours. Worst part was the pilot announced to the 150 plus people on the plane that it was my fault that we weren't able to leave. I was 18 at the time and scared shitless working the check-in counter for the next 12 hours with a mob of angry passengers. All they were missing were pitchforks and torches. Thanksgiving and bam. What 2007. Best one ever. Frick that pilot. I ordered a new lens for our microscope. It cost about $10,000 and that was a deal. The other places had this lens for about 5k more. Boss was quite happy I managed to save so much money. It ended up not being a phase contrast lens so we couldn't view cells. Many LOL were had, especially when it was non-returnable. I'm a robotic engineer. I was working a job at a sausage packing factory. I set the payload parameters too low. To make a long story short, everyone went home that day having been cock-slapped by a robot. I have no idea what happened in this story at all, but I feel like I would fap to it. I traveled to Brazil to do volunteer work and met a beautiful girl. I spoke almost no Portuguese, but we got by and I ended up staying at her house for a week while I had a week in transit traveling between places. Her family was so nice to me. They made me dinner lunch every day and I didn't pay a cent. It was the best week, until the girl and I wanted to watch a movie, but I was told that my feet were too dirty to lie on her bed. I was out playing with her dog, and I had to wash them. I jumped over her to go to the bathroom, but slipped on the way. I landed on her and badly dislocated her knee. She was screaming in agony and was in a lot of pain. I ran for her mother and called her in broken Portugals to come help. Her mother, father, 2 brothers and even the dog, who I had to hold back, were in the room, and I had to explain to them in broken Portuguese why their daughter sister was crying in agony and how her knee is dislocated. I was told that it was the worst pain she had ever felt in her life. Worst part about it, she was going on a fancy cruise in 2 weeks time and had to spend the whole thing on crutches, i.e. no stilettos, no dancing, nada. For the curious, we are still together 3 years later and her family, and of course my girlfriend, love telling the story. When my girlfriend was waiting for the doctor, my girlfriend's mother said she was more worried for me. She thought I was going to pass out because I went so pale. I will take the embarrassment to my grave. That didn't end the way I thought it would. Good work, buddy. Another nurse, not me, gave an iron injection to a woman who happened to be in the adult entertainment industry using the incorrect technique, which resulted in a horrible giant stain on the skin of her butt. Fell through the ceiling of a multi-million-dollar home. The house had been under construction for over 2 years and was set to be 100% complete the next day. If you fell through a ceiling on a house, I don't think it was fit to be 100% complete. Posted this before, but I broke $1 million machine. X-rayed the fructometer with a robot disc loading system. I was allowed to make my own discs, but I wasn't supposed to touch the machine, even though I had ascertained how it worked after months of being there. It's an insurance thing. I wasn't officially trained, ergo no touchy, so one day I really needed a sample processed ASAP. The machine was free, no one was using it. I couldn't find a single person out of the 6 or so folks who were allowed to touch it, so I thought, frick it, I'll load the disc, do it in less than an hour and no one will be any the wiser. So I make my disc and walk over to the machine. Press the button to unlock the cabinet. Woo woo woo. Sput sput sput. Silence. The lights all go out. Machine becomes totally unresponsive. What happened next is one of my proudest moments of crisis management. I calmly went over the bench, put on some gloves, cleaned away all my disc prep, got a cloth, wiped down every part of the machine I had touched, binned everything and walked away, locking the door behind me. I go upstairs, sit in the lab and make a new batch of formula, even though I don't need one. The next day someone asks me if I used the machine. I play dumb and say I was just about to find the person so they could run a sample for me. She tells me not to bother because the diffractometer is knackered. I say that's a shame. By this point I've spent 30 hours with a pulse of 110 at least. The next day they tell me that the maintenance staff forgot to fill the cooling vats, so the machine shut itself off in self-defense. Overwhelming relief floods my body. Honestly, if I had actually broken it, I would have taken that secret to my grave. TLDR. Thought I had broken the most expensive diffractometer on campus. What happened next is one of my proudest moments of crisis management. That's not crisis management. That's covering your butt. I used to work for a veterinarian and one of our tasks was to euthanize sick animals just like any other vet's office. The veterinarian usually left this task up to the other technicians and myself, until one day we put the wrong dog to sleep. I still feel awful about it to this day. Both dogs were sick and both were poodles, and I was instructed to go get the sick poodle ready for euthanasia. I was flirting with a co-worker after we had closed. She said something about not being afraid of anything. So, being the wise bit that I am, I stretched a rubber band and pointed it at her face from a foot away. I just stared at her. She smiled and said, "You don't have the balls." So, naturally, I let go of the rubber band, but I tried to do it in the way where it shoots backwards, just to fake her out. Well, as you could guess with the context of this thread, it ended up going the other direction. The in her face direction. Smacks her in the face right under her eye. It welted up almost instantly and her eye get red and tit up. Instead of apologizing like every ounce of my body was screaming for me to do, I just said I don't have the what now. She just started laughing and then I explained I didn't mean to hit her, and we still went out on our date. Dated for several months after. TLDR. Had the balls. LOL'd at the TLDR. Accidentally turned off 911 service for the entire city of San Diego once. It was only for about 30 seconds, but made me feel bad. I was a grooms engineer for MCI WorldCom back in the late 90s. My job was to decide which backbone internet pipes, DS3S, OC48s, OC192s, etc. to route traffic through, and sometimes change them. I made a mistake. I caught it right away, but on something that big it takes a few seconds for everything to propagate. This means that instructions to the backbone internet router's switches take commands kind of like dropping a pebble in a pond. A wave of info rolls out. Even if you make another change in the middle, you have to wait for it to propagate out. In this case it was some BGPSS7 commands. That's it. Tried to stack 1-ton containers of pork rind and other meat byproducts for high. Failed. Spent the rest of the day picking up 3 tons of said byproducts. Failed to include the line supplied without cord. Must be installed by an electrician in the product sheet and manual of a 400V 10 kilowatts bakery oven. Customers were not amused. Mistranslated caution. Wet floor is Acton. Nassenboden, a German native speaker, erupted in laughter when he saw the 5,000 signs when they were delivered. Spent too much time on Reddit, causing a production delay for a seasonal product, missing the season. I was working as a co-op at a very large federal agency. I don't remember why, but I was trying to locate a particular computer on the network in our local office. We had about 1,100 employees. I double, triple, quadruple checked the command I was going to do. Even had the help from other employees to verify it. The message was please call IT and ask for Puck Happy. I fired it off the message and went back to work waiting for the call to come. This would bring a pop-up on the screen and you had to click OK to make it go away, so whoever got the message would not miss it. Right away the phone in IT started ringing off the hook. Turns out, I had screwed up an option in the command line, and it fired to every computer in the domain. A domain is typically all the computers located at a site or organization. This particular agency's domain was split into multi-tiers, primary tiers at the region level, and secondary tiers at the individual site level. So at first I thought I had sent it to every computer at our site. 1,100. In actuality, I sent it to every computer in the entire region. All 20,000 plus of them. The calls rang for hours and days afterwards. People asking to speak with a lowly no-name co-op student. I got into quite a bit of trouble for that one. Also, at the same place, I gave a friend of mine a paper cut on his eyeball. TLDR. Asked 20,000 to phone me as a co-op student at a government agency. Also, paper cut on eyeball. Whoa dude. The drama for Rise Against came into the bank I worked at to exchange a few grand worth of Canadian money back to USD as they just finished playing out there on tour. I was starstruck and nervous as heck. Ended up not paying attention to my screen and gave him about $300 too much. A couple months later we had to go into his account and take the extra money back out. My service manager just thought it was funny because she knew how nervous I got around him. Did anyone else imagine before clicking the link someone in a strip club with a high-powered laser pointer pointing it on stage and burning a stripper's vagina? My first thought was of someone working stage show lasers and pointing it at her vagina for too long. I am a chef. One time a few years back, this young kid on the line left his knife in an awkward position and went for a smoke break. My dumb ass grabbed the knife from the blade end and nearly sliced my fingers off. I started bleeding profusely all over the cutting board and salad station. A busboy drove me to the nearest hospital where I had to take a drug test and receive 9 stitches. The owners of the restaurant paid for everything and I got a month off of work paid. It was probably one of the dumbest things I had ever done. I needed the break though. I get about 3 people threatening me with lawsuits each week, but that's how I know I'm doing my job well. Man, I hate my job. I worked at a nice restaurant in high school, and I was stupid. We had a large private party, and we needed champagne glasses at the bar in the front of the restaurant. They were all in the back. I had a great idea. I just put them all on a tray and walked them through the crowd to the front. Champagne glasses, being tall and thin, and not very stable, and hard to balance, let alone when you are trying to put about 100 on a very large tray. But it was fun putting them all on the tray. Then I try to pick it up and immediately spill all of them on the floor. Fortunately I was still in the kitchen, but I destroyed so many glasses. Yeah, that's the end of the story. Scratched the wing of an F-15 by accident. They had to change the entire wing because of it. Who knows how many millions of dollars it costed. I used to work on a nuclear missile carrying submarine. During missile ops, a missile was pulled up and out of a tube. Well, we have procedures for a reason. The procedure wasn't followed exactly like it was supposed to when the missile hit a ladder left in the tube. A big freaking deal. Like the president gets a phone call from someone within a half hour. Big deal. My job is not involved with the missiles, but I was there and holy tea, I have never seen so many high-ranking people so off scared. We take stuff like this about as serious as you can possibly imagine. Well, I'd hope so. It's a freaking missile. I used to work in a factory that used liquid aluminum to make car parts. My crap job was skimming the impurities off of the top of the tanks that held the aluminum. Accidentally knocked a fiberglass cover into a tank of boiling aluminum. Had to shut down an entire factory with hundreds of workers because of the acrid smoke. Some of the lady meat on site may have been affected. I didn't crack a smile till the last one. You snuck that one in on me. Hold up. Works 3 nights a week and has plenty of money saved that she can leave for 2 weeks and not be an issue. I'm going to be a stripper. I work as a system admin on a payroll application, PeopleSoft. I had been running queries in the database most of the morning when someone requested some data be dumped from one of our test environments. I got the script, pre-written, and ran it, but forgot to log out of the production database and into the test database. We had to restore from the previous night's backup and manually reapply all the logs. Took us about 10 hours to get back where we were before I screwed up. From that day on, I always back up the tables before any mod, which is a good practice anyway, regardless of the environment. Every bit of trash is prod once. Anyone who hasn't simply lacks experience. One of my all-time greatest moments while working at a call center for large telco. We worked the shift that closed for the state. Customer called in to disconnect a home phone line. I transposed the number and disconnected the main line for a 250-line apartment complex. With the main number disconnected, all the lines under it went out of service and were removed from the database. As it was the last call of the day, no one was there to pick up to fix it. By the time the opened in the morning, the automated line assignment system had started assigning dozens of numbers from the complex to new customers who were waiting for service. Took about 2 days with 3 people working all day to clean up. Many credits were issued for many dollars when that was done. Q is pronounced K. Q is pronounced Caillou or Q. I used a company van for personal use and hit a deer. I should say the deer hit me because the deer was quite large and it ran into me. Airbags go off. I had welts on my forearms because of the airbags. I get out to assess the damage. Started to walk around the front of the van and not seeing any damage, thinking, "Ha boy did I get lucky." I get around to the pass side and my "ha boy did I get lucky" changed to "holy crap." There was a almost perfect imprint of a very large deer along the whole length of the van with bits of hair stuck in assorted body panels. I grabbed my flashlight to see if I could find the deer in the woods, but I couldn't. I think I may have just inconvenienced him. I used to work at Lowe's in the garden department. It was the day after Christmas and we had a ton of Christmas trees left, so my co-worker and I decided to mark down a lighter for store use, take a tree around back, and light it on fire. What we didn't think about was the tree sap, which when lit, erupts in a massive plume of smoke. We ran around to the front of the store, casually walked past the cashier, who didn't notice the atomic bomb mushroom cloud rising from the back of the store, and proceeded to the break room. When we got back to the scene of the crime, there was a fire squad and a couple of cops dousing the tree. I didn't get fired. Can't say the same for the tree. TL. DR. Used store product to burn store product. Fire squad came. Didn't get fired. I was assisting with the offload of a C-141 engine off of our C-5. It was during Desert Storm, the 21st of December 1990. A USAF reserve crew was waiting for this engine. They'd been stranded for a week or more, and without this engine they wouldn't make it home for Christmas. Unfortunately, due to some strange geometry with the connection of the engine dolly to the tow vehicle, the tow bar bent in the engine cowling during the offload. All procedures were followed. We did not get in any official trouble, but the engine was not repairable at that location. They estimated $30,000 in damage to the engine. I realized the full price of the damage later that night at the Nco Club. At a table near us we overheard some guys talk about that dang C5 crew that broke their engine. A couple of them talked about missing Christmas. Their kids cried on the phone when they told them, etc. They looked at us and could tell we were from a C5. They asked if we knew who it was. There were several C5s in that night, and of course we said we didn't know anything about it. The look on their sad and angry faces made me feel worse than anything up to that point. Okay, I have an awesome story, but it happened to my friend, not me. Basically, he was working in this movie theater over the summer. There were a lot of young people there, and one girl in particular who he had his eye on. After work, they all had to clean up. Someone had been sick, so they swept that up into a bucket, and then they mopped up. He took the buckets outside to the lobby, and met the girl and a couple more employees there. They started fooling around a bit, and the girl was flicking at him with her dirty mop, and it turned into a full-on water fight. He thought he'd get her back by throwing a bucket of water at her. Unfortunately, he picked up the bucket of sick. He threw a bucket full of sick into the face and mouth of the girl he liked. Weirdly enough, they ended up dating anyway. This thread title gave me the sinking feeling I get every time the thought comes into my head. I was working at a PC repair shop and an old guy and his dog came in with his desktop, so I went to take it off him as he was clearly exhausted from carrying it and the counter was quite high. He was holding it with his arm wrapped around it, so I lifted it from the bottom of the front and back. However, as I turned to lift it onto the counter, the plastic panel on the front of the computer popped off and it went flying. I won't go into details, but the computer was a standard ATX case's dog, a 15-year-old Yorkshire Terrier. I didn't know what to say, other than apologizing. I just didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I should offer him a drink. I felt like I should be taking him somewhere for some reason, but I didn't have a car, so I said I could call for someone to give him a lift, but he just asked for the IKEA bag in the back room, put his dog in it and left, leaving his computer, which he never came to collect. Man, that woman is seriously really cool. I mean, really? You burned my bag all up, but hey, don't worry about it. It's cool. Dang. If you did that to me, I'd be such a hot mess in your office. What did you do to my lady pirates? Why did you do this? P. I once drove the tines of a forklift through the walk-in cooler walls at a local entertainment venue. I got suspended from using the forklift for a month, and that was it. Another time someone else backed it up into a fence post and I thought it was funny, so I was laughing. Boss comes out and suspends both of us from the forklift for 2 weeks. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.